If you wouldn't mind dropping a like and subscribing, that would be great. But let me warn you up front, I am a pro-Ukrainian YouTuber, so run now if you must. Whilst the world is focused on what is happening in the war in Ukraine, the civil war brewing in Russia is another major concern that could make the current war look small and insignificant in terms of size and brutality. A lot of the information I am going to cover, you probably will know already. There is a point, stay with me. It all starts with Wagner. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has made Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of the mercenary group, a celebrity of sorts, both at home and abroad. He is both praised and demonized, while people constantly discuss the relationship he has with President Vladimir Putin, what privileges he has, and even whether he harbors presidential or political ambitions. Despite his status, Prigozhin is still only acting as a private individual. His relationship with the state is informal, and therefore could end without warning. Putin has agreed to outsource certain state functions but has not legitimized Prigozhin himself. The president has never seen the businessman as a replacement for official institutions such as the army or security services, nor has he ever tried to use him as a balance to those institutions. Giving the man that sort of influence would only disturb Putin's idea of complete power. Prigozhin shot to success because the situation at the front was disastrous and needed improving by any means possible, not because of Putin's intervention. Who considered private military companies there to strengthen the position of the state, not weaken it? So where did it go wrong? It started in Syria, where Wagner operated as a contractor for the general staff, whose handling of them led to the group's first conflicts with the defense ministry. Meanwhile, Wagner's presence in various African countries helped the company to establish special relationships with the Russian ambassadors there, which annoyed the foreign ministry. Then he began to find replacements for his troops in the country's prisons. It was this action that infuriated the Federal Penitentiary Service, Justice Ministry, Prosecutor General's Office, and Federal Security Service, which worked to have these men locked up, only for them now to be possibly released back into society. When Wagner started to operate in the war against Ukraine with seeming autonomy, his growing conflict with the military leadership, in the form of Chief of Staff Valery Gerasimov and Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, started to boil over. After several months of a humiliating campaign launched by Prigozhin against them with the help of his media assets, the two defense officials managed to convince the president that Wagner's independence was a threat to the army. In response, Putin put Gerasimov in charge of the war, replacing General Surovikin, who had been a favorite of the Wagner leader. This showed just how quickly he can sort out a situation whilst ignoring Prigozhin, his adoring military bloggers and the entire camp of pro-war activists who openly hate Gerasimov and Shoigu. Prigozhin's long-standing relationship with the administration is also beginning to crack. The domestic policy overseers don't like his political demagogy, his attacks on official institutions, or his attempts to troll Putin's staff by threatening to form a political party, which would be a headache for everyone in the Kremlin. In other words, Prigozhin has no shortage of enemies. His private army packed with criminals is a major problem for the Russian security services, and they have joined the attacks against him, as evidenced by the sharp uptick in criticism of the businessman and Wagner on Telegram channels. So, what has changed? There is now unconfirmed evidence that Putin has ordered Prigozhin to halt his public criticism of the defense ministry while advising state media to stop mentioning him or Wagner by name. This is an extreme reverse for someone who no doubt saw himself with a political future of some kind, but that star is dimming at a rapid clip. To confirm the situation at a recent interview, he looked into the camera saying that he wouldn't be criticizing anyone any further. The Wagner chief has also now been denied access to prisons and will no longer be able to find replacements through that channel. This would leave him short on men, and it's believed that this pressure, along with the situation in the Kremlin, has left him teetering on the edge of withdrawing his men from Ukraine. There is also the perceived slight of having delivered the only real military victory at Soledar to then be sidelined. But here is the problem for Russia: whilst allowing his ranks to swell to 50,000 men, they have also been supplying him with large quantities of military hardware including jets, tanks and armored vehicles. Wagner is an army, and it's soon going to be an army with a grudge. But despite what most will say, there's real support for Wagner not just globally but also at home. So what happens if Prigozhin lashes out, or something happens to Putin? Does he act militarily, in which case it becomes a real problem for the future of that country? Then of course, things start to get even more problematic when additional mercenary units are brought into the war zone. The one that stands out is the unit that is reputedly organized by Defense Minister Shoigu himself. Patriot PMC, as it's known, is an upgraded version of the Wagner Group where all members are military professionals who are, apparently, still serving in special operations forces. The Patriot members get higher salaries of between $6,100 and $15,200 a month. Has Shoigu had Prigozhin sidelined to free up space and funding for his own PMC, and if so, this could be significant motive for the Wagner chief to act, to protect his company's future and revenue-earning potential. This could also drag the regular army into the fight, who could be forced to side with their de facto boss, Shoigu. Now, the only person holding all of this together is Putin. What happens when he goes? There will be a massive power struggle with numerous players having significant armed forces and cash to further their concerns. As it stands, there are now 9 other Russian PMC groups operating in Ukraine. This is a very dangerous mix in a highly volatile situation. The opportunity for a civil war is fast becoming reality, and it's only a matter of time before it spills over. So now that we can see there are clear egos in play that would surely plunge Russia into a civil war to protect themselves and their own interests. When does this happen? As I have said, I think it's a matter of time. As it stands, Putin is holding it all together by the sheer power of his personality. The Russian war effort in Ukraine has been an abject failure, with huge casualties and massive destruction. There really is no indication that the Russians even want the country anymore. I mean, they have become so weak. Even if they take it, what do they do with it? They don't have the resources to repair the country, and they won't get any external support with this project. It's fast become a situation where Putin believes that if he cannot have Ukraine, then no one can. In a previous video, I gave him 1 year to finish this war successfully or risk losing his premiership. Since that video, others have changed. Putin has erected his posters for re-election, which also casts a shadow over his apparent illnesses. From what we can see, Putin is in it for the long term. That means his detractors now know they are going to be stuck with him for longer than they may have hoped. This may start to wear incredibly thin, especially with the losses mounting and ambitions needing to be satisfied. This of course brings us back to Prigozhin. If, as he claims, he is not interested in a political future, he might find himself with a backer. Someone who is prepared to keep his Wagner in play if he supports them with his military might. So could they convince him to act? Let's be clear, the leader of Wagner is an ex-con. If he finds himself with his back to the wall, he will act, and it will be decisive. What's more, his arch-enemy Shoigu and Gerasimov will join the mob to bring him down, making things substantially worse. So, what pushes the Putin detractors over the edge? Well, it will be because of Ukraine. Sun Tzu speaks of building your enemy a golden bridge so that he can retreat. Currently Putin is cornered, and what happens if general mobilization and conventional war fails, which I truly believe it will? Does he decide to nuke Ukraine? Personally, I think then you will start to see some truly mad moves from him to change the tide. At this point, it will become unacceptable. The end will come swiftly, and then the power struggle will begin.